everyone. It's a dose of Dr. Drew.
Hey, everybody. Welcome. We are very privileged to have with us today Dr. Nock. You can follow him at Dr. Nock, PhD. My goodness, my Dr. Nock, I've been trying to learn French, and my mouth has been all tied up ever since.
Say it in French.
Je suis, or as they say, je suis très excité. I don't know anymore. I can't. I can understand lots of it, but being able to produce it. Okay. Dr. Nock, PhD, Dr. Dr. Nock, PhD.com. Also on Twitter, on TikTok as Dr. Dr. And also, what is the Instagram?
Same thing, Dr.Noc. Same thing as TikTok.
Yep. I thought TikTok was Dr_NOC.
No, dot.
I think it's a dot.
Pretty
sure it's a dot. Yep.
I can put it up.
Where did I get the underscore? Okay, but Dr. Nock is talk to us. What I wanted to get straight as we start out today is your background of what you're doing presently, so people understand why I get very excited about speaking to you. You're somebody that's been involved in this field of virology for quite some time, and all of a sudden your field has become something of immense interest nationally and internationally.
Unexpected.
Yeah,
That's
unexpected.
Right. Unexpected social interest.
And I guess it's not that unexpected. You must have been anticipating pandemics at some point in your career, I imagine. But tell us your training and what you do now.
Maybe, yeah. So, once upon a time, PhD scientist developing monoclonal antibodies for respiratory infectious disease. I still do that, for COVID now, for RSV, for influenza, for other respiratory pathogens. But now with the addition, since the start of the pandemic, I'm doing social media, largely started doing it. I was on the platforms on TikTok, Instagram, everything, browsing content, started seeing a bunch of misinformation posted by people who very clearly didn't have a background in science. It's very easy for people with a background in science to tell who knows what they're talking about and who doesn't know what they're talking about.
Yes, it is.
And I wasn't seeing very many people who knew what they were talking about.
And by the way, one of the signs that somebody knows what they're talking about is they will always tell you they're not sure. They don't know what they're talking about. If you see certainty, run. That's just generally the case. I think that's a good. That's a good. If you can't have any other judgment, couched. Yeah. If you see somebody with absolute certainty, just go. I doubt it.
Yeah, and that's built into you during your scientific training because you give a seminar to a room of 40 scientists. 5 of which might be experts in your field, and if you make a highly certain statement that's a little bit wrong, they will tear you apart. And so it's sort of built into the process of learning how to communicate accurately. Now, that's normal within the scientific sphere, but it's not as normal out in the rest of life. And so people hear that uncertainty and they think, well, this person doesn't really know what they're talking about. When that's in contrast with someone who is making very certain statements, they say, oh, this person does know what they're talking about. And it's very often the exact flip-flop of that circumstance.
Yeah, and again, it's not just when you make declarations of certainty that your peers tear you apart. They are there to tear you apart for every word that comes out of your mouth, and that's the scientific process, which is negation and scrutiny and revision and attempts to recreate the data. That's it. That's the process, and as a result, you get very accustomed to, well, really, it's critical thought as we get used to, and you sort of wash out your cognitive dissonance. Unfortunately, and to be fair, there are our brain system is somewhat flawed, so we always have these cognitive distortions that get in the way of all scientific process, reasoning from conclusion or things that sort of bias us. But we're trained to watch out for all that more than probably anybody else in the world, right?
Right. Yeah, if you're not paying attention, sort of the default way to look at the world is to categorize stuff, often very simply, black and white, just put it into 3 different bins. That's the easiest thing to do. It works very well for most circumstances. Unfortunately, a lot of things don't fall quite as easily into, two realities.
Right.
And so knowing where it's important to draw those distinctions in the gray in between is tough.
And then the working through of the gray to something clearer, which is sort of what the process is too. So your training was, what was your original training in?
It was in pharmaceutical sciences and immunology. So studying antibody responses against drugs that you take, which is something you don't want to have happen because then, your body clears the drugs from circulation. So that was my PhD. And then since the PhD, I've still been studying antibodies, but used therapeutically, largely antiviral types of monoclonal antibodies used to treat disease. I don't actually do any work, in my career sense on development of vaccines. It's totally on the therapeutic side.
Let me just ask your opinion. You know, people are looking for a language. I don't know why exactly yet, but I saw Susan got upset because Don Lemon was equating putting something in your system as a monoclonal antibody with putting something in your system, a lipoid shell mRNA that stimulates immune production.
And also was sort of dissing the person getting the treatment who had COVID.
I understand, but he was just
And
equating
he couldn't
these two
say
things.
the word
How do we help
monoclonal antibody like
No.
you've never read it
Susan,
before.
hold on. I don't want to get way into this, but, and we, yes, Josh, I will talk about molnupiravir, I promise. But underneath that was this weird, I don't know what to make of it, confusion people have about the mRNA viruses, mRNA vaccines, and whether they're a therapeutic or a vaccination. Can you help sort some of that out?
Yeah, for sure. And so both of them are, under emergency use authorization. Both of them are highly studied vehicles for drug delivery or for vaccine delivery. So the vaccines are prophylactic. It only works if you give ahead of time, because no matter how healthy you are, no matter how good your immune system is, it takes time. So from the first time you see, whether it's the pathogen when you're infected or the vaccine when you get the vaccination, it takes at least 7, 10, 14 days for your immune system to take that pathogen, show it to the right cells, build up the immune response. And so the only way that works is if you get it like way ahead of time, but at least a couple of weeks ahead of time. And so that's the prophylactic vaccine mRNA,
So
Pfizer,
let me
Johnson
just put a little finer point on what you're saying, which is that for me, parsing out what this is sort of a fool's errand. A vaccination is something that stimulates your immune system prophylactically ahead of time. That's
right.
Enough? Can we all agree?
People
that's
do
sort of
get into
vaccine?
that. A lot of people say the mRNA vaccines, they're not technically vaccines because they are mRNA based, which doesn't make any sense to anyone who, the purpose of a vaccine is train the immune system.
That's it. Period. Period. End of story. And that's how maybe it's a recharacterization of vaccines, but for those of us that are biologists, that's the category. That's vaccine. And monoclonal antibodies are doing the same thing. It's just your body's not producing these antibodies, and they're directed to singular proteins. Speak about that for a second.
So when you get a vaccination and you give your body the spike protein, it attacks it from a bunch of different angles. So you have some attacking over here, some attacking over here, some attacking over here. And what that means is if like this region of the virus mutates a little bit, those antibodies might not bind as well, but you still have some coming from this direction and this direction. Monoclonal antibodies, it's just you're giving, maybe one of them that attacks over here, or maybe a combination of two of them, one that attacks here, one that attacks here. And so it's useful therapeutically because you can infuse it into someone and they immediately have them. You don't have to wait for 7 or 14 days for the immune system to build them up because you're giving them directly. But because they are inherently less diverse than the ones that you make from vaccination, they're a bit more susceptible to mutations that end up happening. And so they work really well. We've seen data for people who are at high risk for progression to severe COVID. If you get an infusion of monoclonal antibodies very soon after you get a positive diagnosis, it can reduce your risk of hospitalization by like 70%, 80%. That number goes down substantially in some cases if there are some particular mutations, and different monoclonal antibodies will be affected differently. We've seen the ones from Eli Lilly, for example, don't work as well as they used to with some of the new variants, but some of the other monoclonal antibodies still do work. So it's certainly not a substitute for vaccination. In the ideal world, you get vaccinated. If you have a breakthrough infection, you get early treatment with monoclonal antibodies, or maybe in the future with an oral antiviral or something, which will further reduce your risk of hospitalization. If then you get hospitalized, then you take, corticosteroids or some other anti-inflammatory types of drugs. Ideally, you're addressing it at each of those stages. You're not saying, this one drug is a replacement for vaccination or something like that.
No, that's right. I've been saying this for a while, that we need to have, just in basic principles, we need vaccine therapies, we need antiviral therapies, therapeutics. But there's another category here that I wanted to get.
Drew, can I interrupt for just a second?
Yeah.
I need to turn off YouTube.
We do?
Yeah, I do.
Just because we're talking about vaccine therapy?
Yeah, whenever we say, people are writing in words like jab and vaccines and talking about deaths and stuff. That it's just not compliant with the YouTube thing. So I'm gonna send everybody on YouTube over to Facebook, over to
Can we get
Twitch,
Rumble going?
No.
Why not?
No, that's only for Ask Dr. Drew because
Why?
I don't have it hooked up on this.
Oh my
show.
God.
I know, honey.
Okay,
We
Andrew
don't need, it's
Ashvili.
okay.
Andrew, you're asking an important question. I will get to it. See us over on Facebook.
Yeah,
or
go
Twitch
ahead
or
and ask
something.
your questions. It'll be up on the Restream chat. But if you can find all the links at drdrew.tv, you can go to Twitch, Facebook, Twitter, and just say whatever you want.
See, we are
over there.
living in fear of the platforms that allow us the privilege to stream upon because they have been
We don't want to. No,
arbitrary
it's just
and,
the words
and bizarre.
I don't know. All I know is anything.
Let's just state it out front. Two professionals talking about their field
Right.
Is something that's too much for
Yeah, but
YouTube
there's
to handle.
people on
Fantastic.
the stream typing in that
I know,
vaccines
I get
are
it.
bad, and I
get
can't
it.
do that. You can do that everywhere else, but we
can't
don't
do
want
that
to lose
on
our
YouTube.
channel. But we love you, YouTube. We'll see you this Tuesday or Monday and Tuesday on Ask Dr. Drew for a short period of time as well.
Again,
okay.
we have to hop off so we don't get permanently lifted.
I want you guys to be able to speak
Freely. We have to be able to.
Yes.
And thank you, YouTube, for not giving us the liberty to speak.
Wait,
and
Drew,
by the
don't.
way,
Well, I suspect it's not our discussion that they would take issue with. It's the
not.
colorful comments that might result.
Yeah.
Yeah,
could be
that
the
and
issue.
also just the words trigger, and then you try to you can't
I
really
retweeted Voltaire today. Man is free is at the moment that he wishes to be. Think that, everybody. Put that in your head.
Well, I'm going to be
I've
free of YouTube comments in a couple of minutes,
All right,
so it'll
all right,
feel
all right.
better. I just don't. I get that feeling.
Thank you,
like,
Colin Robinson. I know passion bothers you. Colin Robinson is a character from What We Do in the Shadows. in case
Yes,
anybody
yes.
doesn't know.
Thank you, guys. See you on the
Okay,
other side.
so can we just